Hello and welcome back to our deep dive into the First World War today. We're focusing on the year 1915, a period that shattered any lingering hopes of a short war and introduced new, terrifying dimensions to the conflict. If you thought 1914 was brutal, 1915 was the year the world truly understood the grim reality of modern industrial warfare. As 1915 dawned, the Western Front had settled into a horrifying stalemate. The race to the sea was over, and in its place was a continuous line of trenches stretching from the Swiss border to the North Sea. Both the Allies and the Central Powers believed they could break this deadlock with one massive, decisive offensive. They were tragically wrong. The year was defined by a series of costly and largely futile battles. The French, under General Joffre, launched major offensives in Champagne and Artois. Their strategy was one of relentless attack, believing that sheer elan and manpower could overwhelm German defenses. The Second Battle of Artois in May saw initial French gains, but German counterattacks quickly reversed them. The cost was immense, with over 100,000 French casualties for minimal territorial change. Later in the year, the Second Battle of Champagne followed the same brutal pattern. Massive artillery bombardments, followed by infantry assaults against well-entrenched machine guns and barbed wire. Again, the gains were negligible, and the losses were staggering. The British also learned the harsh lessons of trench warfare. At the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle in March, they achieved a tactical surprise and a quick breakthrough. But problems with communication and bringing up reserves meant the opportunity was lost. This battle highlighted a critical issue for the British: a severe shortage of artillery shells. This shell crisis of 1915 led to a political firestorm back home and a major reorganization of British industry to support the war effort. Later, at the Battle of Loos in September, the British used poison gas for the first time, but shifting winds made it as dangerous for their own troops as it was for the Germans. The battle descended into another bloody stalemate. Speaking of poison gas, 1915 saw the sinister escalation of chemical warfare. During the Second Battle of Ypres in April, the Germans unleashed chlorine gas on a massive scale against French and Canadian troops. The terrifying greenish-yellow cloud drifted across no man's land, causing panic, suffocation, and a gaping hole in the Allied line. The Germans, unprepared for the gas's effectiveness, failed to exploit the breakthrough fully. But a new and terrible weapon had been introduced, and both sides would rush to develop their own chemical agents and protective masks, adding another layer of horror to life in the trenches. While the Western Front was a story of deadlock, the Eastern Front was one of dramatic movement. At the start of the year, Russia was still pressing its attacks against Austria-Hungary in the Carpathian Mountains. However, the tide was about to turn. In May, a combined German and Austro-Hungarian force launched the Gorlice-Tarnow offensive in southern Poland. This was a stunning success. Using overwhelming artillery superiority, they shattered the Russian lines. What followed was what became known as the Great Retreat. Throughout the summer of 1915, the Russian army was pushed back hundreds of miles, abandoning all of Poland, Lithuania, and parts of modern-day Belarus and Latvia. The Russians suffered catastrophic losses, with over 1 million men taken prisoner. Although Russia remained in the war, its army was severely weakened, and the defeat had profound consequences for morale on the home front. Meanwhile, the Ottoman Empire, which had joined the Central Powers in late 1914, became the target of a major Allied campaign. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, championed a bold plan to force the Dardanelles straight with naval power, knock the Ottomans out of the war, and open a supply line to Russia. The naval attack in March failed, with several Allied battleships sunk by Turkish mines. The decision was then made to launch a land invasion of the Gallipoli Peninsula. On April 25, 1915, British, French, and most famously, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, the ANZUS CS, landed at different points on the peninsula. They were met with fierce and determined Ottoman resistance, led by commanders like Mustafa Kemal, the future Ataturk. Instead of a swift victory, the Allies found themselves bogged down in another trench warfare stalemate, clinging to small beachheads under constant fire from the heights above. The conditions were appalling, with intense summer heat, rampant disease, and a constant shortage of water. After months of brutal fighting and failed offensives, the campaign was deemed a failure. The Allies evacuated in December 1915 and January 1916, having suffered 250,000 casualties. For Australia and New Zealand, the Gallipoli campaign became a defining moment in their national identities, a symbol of immense bravery and sacrifice. 1915 also saw Italy enter the war. Lured by promises of territorial gains from Austria-Hungary and the secret Treaty of London, Italy declared war on its former ally in May, opening a new front in the mountainous terrain of the Alps. The Italian commander, Luigi Cadorna, launched a series of offensives against the Austrians along the Isonzo River. From June to December, 4 separate battles of the Isonzo were fought. Each was a bloody failure. The mountainous terrain heavily favored the defenders, and the Italians suffered enormous casualties for virtually no gain. This brutal mountain warfare would characterize the Italian front for the next 2 years. The war also expanded beyond the main European theaters. The Balkans, Serbia, which had miraculously repelled the Austro-Hungarians in 1914, was finally crushed. In October 1915, the Central Powers, now joined by Bulgaria, launched a combined invasion from the north and east. The Serbian army was overwhelmed and forced into a harrowing retreat through the Albanian mountains in the dead of winter, an event known as the Albanian Golgotha. The survivors were eventually evacuated by Allied ships, but Serbia was completely occupied. The war at sea also took a crucial turn. In February, Germany declared the waters around the British Isles a war zone and began a campaign of unrestricted submarine warfare with their U-boats, sinking merchant ships without warning. This policy reached a crisis point on May 7, 1915. With the sinking of the British passenger liner Lusitania off the coast of Ireland, nearly 1,200 people died, including 128 Americans. The act caused massive international outrage, particularly in the United States, and brought America a step closer to entering the war. To avoid antagonizing the U.S. further, Germany eventually scaled back its unrestricted submarine warfare for a time. On the home fronts, 1915 was the year the reality of a long, total war set in. Governments took greater control over their economies and societies. Munitions production was ramped up. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers to fill the jobs left by men at the front. And propaganda became an essential tool for maintaining morale and demonizing the enemy. By the end of 1915, the war had become a global conflict of attrition. The quick, glorious victory everyone had hoped for was a distant memory. The Central Powers had made significant gains in the East and the Balkans, but the Western Front remained a bloody deadlock. The Allies had failed at Gallipoli and on the Isonzo. New, horrific technologies were being deployed, and the casualty lists were growing to an unimaginable scale. The year ended not with a resolution in sight, but with both sides digging in, preparing for an even bloodier and more protracted struggle in the year to come. 1915 was the furnace that forged the grim, grinding character of the First World War. Thanks for watching. If you found this summary helpful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more historical content, and let us know in the comments what aspect of 1915 you find most significant. We'll see you in the next video as we explore the carnage of 1916.